Dawn broke over the Carter estate, a stately mansion nestled among the lush green hills of upstate New York. Pale golden light filtered through the tall windows, casting a glow on the sparkling granite walls, as if to bless the special day. In the vast garden behind the house, white roses and lavender bushes had been arranged with meticulous care, their fragrance mingling with the cheerful chirping of birds. Gentle classical music drifted from afar, blending with the soft clinking of crystal glasses as staff prepared tables draped in white silk. Everything was perfect, or at least that's what Olivia Carter wanted to believe. Olivia stood in the grand foyer of the estate, her tall, slender figure wrapped in a white silk robe that hugged her body. At 38, she was the picture of success. A brilliant black American lawyer, with radiant brown skin and naturally curly hair, neatly tied at the nape of her neck. Her sharp brown eyes skimmed the checklist in her hand, reviewing the final details of the wedding. The cake had arrived. The band was ready, and the photographer was capturing the first moments. Every item had been ticked off, yet an unnamed restlessness stirred in her chest. She shook her head, convincing herself it was only nerves. Today she was marrying Ethan Hayes, the man who had brought light back into her life after years of darkness. Olivia took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the sparkling engagement ring on her hand, a gift from Ethan with a large diamond he said was worthy of a woman like you. She smiled, but the smile hadn't yet reached her eyes when a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mommy." Olivia turned around, her gaze softening at seeing her 7-year-old daughter Zoe standing in the doorway. Zoe wore a light lavender dress, her hair braided into delicate twists with small white flowers. But her face didn't glow like a child on her mother's wedding day. Her big round eyes, so much like Olivia's, shimmered with worry, making Olivia pause. "My love, you look beautiful," Olivia said, stepping forward and gently brushing a stray lock from Zoe's forehead. She knelt to meet her daughter's eyes, trying to dispel the unease. "Why do you look so worried? Today's a happy day." Zoe bit her lip, her small hands clutching the hem of her dress. She looked up, her voice trembling but firm. "Mommy, I don't want you to marry him." Olivia blinked, surprised by the seriousness in her daughter's tone. "Do you mean Ethan?" "Why, sweetheart? He's been so kind to us." Zoe shook her head, her eyes shimmering as if she might cry. "He's not being real. I know. He's pretending." Zoe's words landed like a pebble tossed into a still lake, sending ripples through Olivia's heart. A wave of heat rose in her chest, but she held it back, keeping her voice calm. "Zoe, you're just nervous, that's all. Ethan loves me, and he cares for you too. You'll see, everything will be fine." Olivia stroked her daughter's cheek, hoping her tenderness would soothe her. But Zoe didn't smile. She lowered her head, her small shoulders tense, as if bearing a secret far too heavy for a child. Outside, laughter from the staff mingled with the soft strains of violin music. Olivia stood up and took Zoe's hand, leading her into the garden, where the first guests were beginning to arrive. Women in wide-brimmed hats and men in sharp suits started to gather, raising champagne glasses beneath the shade of ancient oak trees. Ethan Hayes, Olivia's fiancé, stood near the fountain with a phone to his ear. He was a tall, white American man with golden blonde hair and a warm smile that could melt anyone's heart. His navy blue suit fit his athletic frame perfectly, and every gesture radiated the confidence of a successful businessman. He ended his call, turned around, and caught Zoe's gaze from across the garden. His smile seemed to freeze for a split second. His eyes flashed coldly at the girl before quickly softening back into their usual warmth. He waved at Zoe, but she didn't wave back. Her stomach tightened, seized by a certainty she couldn't explain. Ethan was not a good man. Olivia, standing beside Zoe, didn't notice the moment. She was busy greeting a guest, her radiant smile slightly strained. She wanted to believe everything was on track and that today would begin a new chapter for Zoe and her. But deep inside, Zoe's words, "He's pretending," echoed like a jarring note in the perfect symphony of the wedding day. She shook her head, telling herself it was just the fear of a little girl who missed her father. James, her late husband, had died 4 years ago in a car accident, leaving Zoe with only hazy memories of a loving dad. Maybe Zoe was just afraid of losing what was left of their small family. Meanwhile, Zoe stood quietly beside her mother, her small hands tightly clasped. She didn't know how to make her mom believe her, but she knew one thing: Ethan Hayes was not who everyone thought he was. She could feel it in his eyes, his smile, and the fleeting chill that crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. Zoe gripped her mother's hand tighter, her heart filled with resolve. If her mom couldn't see it, she would have to find a way to make her understand before it was too late. The morning sun grew more radiant, casting a golden glow across the estate. But beneath that beauty, a storm was quietly gathering, and Zoe, with her small but steadfast heart, would be the first to face it. Today wasn't just Olivia Carter's wedding day. It would be the day truth began to surface, and a 7-year-old girl would become the flame that lit the way through the darkness. The morning sun remained gentle, filtering through the ancient oak trees in the Carter estate's garden. The laughter and chatter of the wedding staff echoed from a distance, mingling with the soft melody of a violin. Still in Olivia Carter's mind, a different stream of memories was rising, pulling her back to the days of 4 years ago. She stood quietly by the large window in the grand foyer, her hands clutching the checklist tightly, her gaze lost in the distance. Her little daughter Zoe stood just a few steps away, still wearing that worried look, but Olivia had not yet recognized the weight behind those eyes. In this still moment, the past returned sharp and painful, like a wound that hadn't healed. Olivia's life was a perfect painting 4 years ago, though not without its cracks. She and her husband, James Carter, had built a happy little family in New York. James, a talented Black American engineer with a radiant smile, had been Olivia's steady rock. He loved Zoe, their 3-year-old daughter, with all his heart, often playing adventurous games with her in the backyard or reading her bedtime stories. Olivia, then a young and ambitious attorney, always felt lucky to have James, the one who reminded her to breathe amidst work pressures. But that picture shattered on a stormy evening when a phone call from the hospital informed her that James had died in a car accident on the highway. A truck had lost control, and James didn't have time to react. He was gone, leaving Olivia and Zoe in a world that suddenly felt hollow. The months that followed were a haze. Olivia threw herself into work as a way to escape the pain. She won major lawsuits and built a strong reputation in New York's legal circles. But each night, returning to the silent house, loneliness suffocated her. Zoe, only 3 at the time, seemed to sense the loss, even if she couldn't fully understand it. She often sat by the window clutching the doll James had given her and asked, "Where did Daddy go?" With a shattered heart, Olivia could only hold her and whisper, "Daddy's in heaven, sweetheart." But such comfort couldn't fill the emptiness in either of them. Olivia learned to hide the pain behind a strong exterior as time passed. She became a resilient single mother, ensuring Zoe had everything she needed: a good school, ballet classes, and summer vacations full of laughter. But deep down, Olivia longed for a companion who could share the burden and bring light back into their lives. That was when Ethan Hayes appeared like a warm breeze amid a bitter winter. Ethan, a white American businessman with golden hair and sparkling eyes, met Olivia at a charity event in Manhattan. He was charming, confident, and had a way of speaking that made Olivia feel seen and appreciated. He spoke of traveling the world and successful business ventures, and more importantly, he listened to her. something Olivia had been missing for a long time. Ethan pursued Olivia with quiet determination. He sent flowers to her office, invited her to elegant dinners, and even spent time with Zoe, though the girl always kept her distance. Initially hesitant, Olivia was gradually drawn in by Ethan's warmth. After years of loneliness, he spoke of the future, a family they could build together. And Olivia began to believe that second chances at happiness were real. She didn't realize that Zoe, with the sharp intuition only a child can have, had sensed something was wrong from the very beginning. Whenever Ethan visited, Zoe would watch him silently, noticing how his smile seemed too perfect, and his eyes brushed past her as if she didn't matter. "Mommy, he's not like Daddy," Zoe once said, but Olivia only smiled, thinking her daughter missed James. Now in the grand hall of the estate, the memory of James and the days that followed his death still sent a pang through Olivia's chest. She looked at Zoe, who stood nearby. Her small hands clenched, her eyes full of worry. Zoe's earlier words, "He's not honest. He's pretending," still echoed in Olivia's mind, but she brushed them aside, telling herself it was only the fear of a child facing change. She stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Zoe's shoulder, her voice soft. "Sweetheart, I know you miss Daddy, but Ethan will be part of our family. He will take care of us." Zoe looked up, her eyes glistening with a despair Olivia had not yet seen. "Mommy, I'm not afraid of change. I'm so scared of him." Those words, though small, pierced Olivia like a knife, causing her to freeze. Outside, the footsteps of arriving guests began to echo along the stone path. Luxury cars pulled up at the estate gates, bringing friends, colleagues, and family. Ethan appeared at the end of the hallway, his navy blue suit tailored perfectly, his smile as dazzling as sunlight. He approached, kissing Olivia softly, and said, "You look stunning today, Liv." Olivia smiled, but her eyes unintentionally drifted toward Zoe, and she saw her daughter watching Ethan with a wariness she couldn't hide. Sensing the gaze, Ethan turned to Zoe, bent down, and said in a sweet tone, "Zoe, you're going to be the most beautiful girl at the wedding." But Zoe didn't respond. She stepped back, avoiding Ethan's hand reaching for her shoulder, and her eyes were more complex than ever. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine, but quickly dismissed it. She took Zoe's hand and led her into the garden, where the sunlight poured golden brilliance over the lavender beds. "Everything will be fine," Olivia whispered, not realizing she was trying to convince herself more than her daughter. But inside Zoe, a small flame was burning. She knew her mother didn't believe her, but she also knew that the truth about Ethan couldn't stay hidden forever. Today, she would have to find a way to make her mother see before it was too late. The pre-wedding party took place in the garden of the Carter estate, where the sunset cast a golden-orange hue over the lavender and white rose bushes. Lanterns hung from the oak branches, emitting a warm glow that lit up long tables covered in silk cloth, where guests clinked glasses of champagne and laughed heartily. Soft jazz music played by a live band blended with the rustle of silk dresses and the taps of leather shoes on the stone walkway. The atmosphere was filled with elegance and joy, but a silent undercurrent was slowly building beneath that perfection. At the center of attention stood Ethan Hayes, Olivia Carter's fiancé. With golden hair and sparkling blue eyes, Ethan, a 40-year-old white American, radiated an irresistible charm. His light gray suit hugged his athletic frame, and every gesture, from how he raised his glass to how he tilted his head while listening, was carefully calculated to captivate. He stood among a group of guests, telling a story about his trip to Italy, his warm baritone voice laced with humor that made the crowd laugh. "So I had to sprint across Florence to catch that train," he concluded, winking at an older woman making her laugh uncontrollably. The crowd was entranced, swept up by his confidence and grace. Ethan knew it, and he savored every second. Standing not far away, Olivia watched Ethan with eyes gleaming with pride. She looked like a queen in her pearl-colored silk dress, her radiant brown skin glowing under the lights, her curly hair pinned up to reveal sparkling pearl earrings. She smiled at the laughter from Ethan's group, feeling light in her chest. After years of loneliness since James's death, Ethan had brought her the feeling of being loved and seen. He was the perfect man, or at least, that's what she believed. She took a sip of champagne, trying to push away Zoe's morning warning. He's pretending. Olivia shook her head, telling herself it was only the fear of a child facing change. But Zoe, standing in the corner of the garden, didn't share the joy of the party. The 7-year-old, dressed in a pale lavender dress adorned with white flowers, clutched a small doll, her father's final gift. Zoe's round eyes never left Ethan, observing him like a hawk. She noticed the way he laughed, patted a male guest on the back, and leaned in to whisper to Olivia. Everything was smooth, too smooth. And then, in a fleeting moment, when Ethan thought no one was watching, Zoe caught his gaze. He was standing near the fountain, phone to his ear, speaking so low it was almost inaudible. But his eyes, cold, sharp, utterly devoid of warmth, sent a chill down Zoe's spine, like someone had poured ice water on her. He ended the call, turned back, and his perfect smile returned instantly, as though the moment had never happened. Zoe clutched her doll tighter, her stomach twisting. She didn't know what he was hiding, but she knew for sure Ethan was not a good man. Unaware of her daughter's watchful gaze, Olivia walked toward Ethan just as he finished his story. He turned to her, placed his hand on her waist, and whispered, "You look stunning, Liv. Everyone's eyes are on you tonight." Olivia smiled, her cheeks blushing, but she didn't see how Ethan's eyes scanned the crowd, as if assessing every person in the garden. "You always know how to make me feel special," she replied softly. Ethan leaned down, kissed her forehead, and said, "Because you deserve it." Sweet words, but from Zoe's corner they felt hollow, like a script played out too many times. Zoe stepped closer to her mother, her little feet moving slowly across the grass. She stopped beside Olivia, took her hand, and said tremblingly, "Mommy, I want to say something." Olivia looked down, slightly surprised, but the smile still lingered on her lips. "What is it, sweetheart? Do you want more cake?" Zoe shook her head, her eyes flicking toward Ethan, who watched her with an unchanged smile. "No, Mommy. It's about him." She pointed at Ethan, her voice small but steady. "He's not good. I know he's pretending." The air around them seemed to thicken. Olivia blinked, her smile fading. Ethan let out a soft laugh, warm but tinged with awkwardness. "Zoe, you have quite the imagination," he said, crouching to her level. "You don't like me because I didn't buy you ice cream yet, right?" But Zoe didn't smile. She stepped back, dodging the hand Ethan reached out to place on her shoulder, and looked him straight in the eyes. "I don't like you because I know you're lying." Those words, though quiet, were like a stone thrown into a still pond, making Olivia freeze. A chill crept down her spine, but she quickly dismissed it. "Zoe, that's enough," she said, her voice low but firm. "Today is a happy day. Don't make Mommy sad." "Okay." Zoe bit her lip, her eyes shimmering with tears. She wanted to scream to make her mother hear, but Olivia's eyes filled with disappointment and fatigue silenced her. She lowered her head, gripped her doll tightly, and stepped back. Ethan, still smiling gently, patted Olivia's shoulder. "Don't worry, Liv. Zoe needs time to warm up to me." But as he turned away to rejoin a guest, his gaze brushed past Zoe once more, and this time his smile didn't reach his eyes. Zoe felt her heart pounding. She didn't know what Ethan was hiding, but she knew he didn't love her mother as he claimed, and she knew that if her mother didn't believe her, She would have to find a way to prove it before tomorrow came, when her mom would walk down the aisle and give her life to that man. The party continued laughing and the clinking of glasses filled the air. Olivia held Ethan's hand, smiling at the guests, trying to focus on the joy. But deep down, Zoe's words echoed within her, like an off-key note in an otherwise perfect melody. She told herself it was just her daughter's fear, but a small part of her buried long ago began to wonder, what if Zoe is right? The night before the wedding, the Carter estate glowed beneath the gentle shimmer of lanterns strung along the hallways and garden. Laughter from the pre-wedding celebration still echoed through the open windows, blending with the soft jazz melodies played by the live band. But the air was cold and silent in the long hallway, leading to Ethan Hayes' office, as though the darkness was swallowing every sound. Zoe, the 7-year-old girl in a pale lavender dress, padded across the marble floor, her bare feet touching the ground softly to avoid making a sound. Her small doll, the last gift from her father, was clutched tightly in her arms, like a talisman against the growing fear inside her. Zoe hadn't meant to come here. After failing to convince her mother about Ethan during the party, she plans to return to her room, curl up in bed, and hope everything is just a bad dream. But as she passed the hallway, she heard Ethan's voice, low, cold, entirely different from the warmth he always showed in front of her mother. His office door was slightly ajar, with a thin strip of light spilling out. Zoe stopped, her heart pounding. She knew she shouldn't be there, but her instincts, the same ones that had long told her something was wrong with Ethan, urged her to move closer. She pressed herself against the doorframe, breathing barely audible, and listened. Inside, Ethan was on the phone, his voice sharp like a blade. "She'll sign everything after the wedding," he said evenly, each word calculated. "She trusts me too much, no suspicion at all. The assets the company shares, everything will belong to us." A pause. Then Ethan chuckled softly, a dry, joyless sound. "The kid. She's just a minor obstacle. No one believes a 7-year-old. Zoe felt the blood in her body freeze. She tightened her grip on the doll, her tiny fingernails digging into her palms. Ethan was talking about her mother, about her, and what he said made her tremble with fear and rage. He didn't love her mother. He only wanted to take everything from them. Zoe stepped back, her foot brushing against a rug, creating a faint sound. Inside, Ethan's voice abruptly stopped. She heard footsteps approaching the door, and in a panic, she bolted down the dark hallway. Heart racing, she darted into a hidden corner near the staircase and waited. But Ethan didn't appear. The office door clicked shut, and his voice resumed quieter now, as if he was confident no one had been listening. Zoe sat curled up, her breath shaky. She didn't know precisely what Ethan was planning, but she knew one thing: her mother was in danger. She had to tell her right now. In the garden, the party continued. Olivia Carter stood among friends, her smile radiant but slightly forced. Her pearl silk gown hugged her figure, her luminous brown skin glowing under the lights, but her eyes occasionally drifted off as if searching for something. Zoe's warning at the party. "He's lying still," echoed in her head, no matter how much she tried to silence it. She took a sip of champagne, telling herself Zoe missed James, her late father. Ethan was a good man. He had been patient with Zoe and had promised to love and protect them both. But then why, deep down, did a flicker of unease still linger? Zoe appeared at the garden's edge, breathless, her face pale. She ran to Olivia, grabbed her hand, and whispered, "Mommy, I need to talk to you. Right now." Olivia turned, surprised by her daughter's panic. She set her champagne down, knelt to Zoe's level, and asked Zoe, "What is it? Are you feeling sick?" Zoe shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "No, Mommy. It's Ethan. I heard him talking in his office. He said you would sign papers after the wedding. He wants your money. He doesn't love you. Zoe's words hit Olivia like a punch to the chest. She blinked, trying to process what she'd just heard. Around them, the guests were still laughing and talking. No one noticed the tension unfolding. Olivia gripped Zoe's shoulders, her voice low but firm. "Zoe, what are you saying? You must have heard wrong. Ethan would never do that." Zoe shook her head vehemently, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. "I didn't hear wrong, Mommy. I heard it. He said you trust him and wouldn't suspect anything. He called me an obstacle." Her voice cracked loud enough to draw curious glances from a few nearby guests. A flush of heat surged through Olivia, part anger, part shame. She glanced around, noticing the eyes beginning to turn their way. "Zoe, keep your voice down," she whispered sharply. "You can't say things like that about Ethan. He's a good man. You're just scared because everything's changing." But Zoe didn't back down. She stood tall, her small hands clenched at her sides, and said, "I'm not afraid of change. I'm worried you'll get hurt. You have to believe me, Mommy." Those words, so desperate, so honest, made Olivia pause. For a fleeting second, she saw James's eyes in Zoe's gaze, steadfast, full of unconditional love. But then she shook her head, stood up, and gripped Zoe's hand more tightly. "That's enough, Zoe. Go to your room. I'll talk to you later." Zoe felt her heart shatter. She looked at her mother, and the last bit of hope faded. She wanted to scream and pull her mother from this garden Ethan, but she knew her mother wouldn't listen. No one would. She lowered her head, tears falling silently, and walked away. The doll in her hand now felt unbearably heavy, as though it carried all her fear. Olivia watched her daughter go, her heart in turmoil. She wanted to believe Zoe, but her love for Ethan and longing for a new family had clouded everything. She turned back to the party, her smile returning, but it no longer shone as before. Ethan ended the call in his office, his eyes flicking toward the slightly ajar door. He hadn't heard Zoe's footsteps, but sensed something was wrong. He stood, opened a drawer, and checked a folder contracts in Olivia Carter's name, ready for her to sign after the wedding. A thin smile curved across his lips, cold and triumphant. Everything was falling into place. Zoe might be suspicious, but she was just a child, and children, as he'd said, are never believed. On the morning of the wedding, the Carter estate shimmered under the early sunlight. Soft golden rays streamed through the tall windows, lighting up the carefully arranged lavender blooms in the garden. Gentle violin music floated from afar, blending with the quiet footsteps of the staff finishing the final preparations. The atmosphere radiated perfection, but inside the bridal suite on the second floor, Olivia Carter felt an undercurrent of unease stirring in her chest. She stood before the mirror, smoothing her white silk gown, her radiant brown skin glowing under the muted light. But her brown eyes, usually sharp and confident, now shimmered with an unnamed anxiety. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to focus on the reflection in the mirror. Today was the day she would marry Ethan Hayes, the man who had brought light back into her life after years of loneliness. But Zoe's warning from the night before, "He wants your money. He doesn't love you," still echoed in her mind like an unending melody. Olivia shook her head, telling herself Zoe was just afraid. The little girl missed James, her late father, and didn't want anyone to take his place. Ethan had been patient. He'd promised to love Zoe like his daughter. But then why did her heart ache every time she thought of Zoe's words? A gentle knock at the door broke her thoughts. Olivia turned, her voice slightly unsteady. "Who is it?" The door opened, and Marcus Tate stood tall and lean in a light gray suit. Marcus, a 40-year-old investigative journalist and Olivia's close friend since college, carried with him a familiar calm. With short, curly hair and piercing eyes, He had always been the person Olivia turned to in difficult times. He smiled, but the worry in his eyes was barely hidden. "Liv," he said warmly, "you look like a dream." Olivia smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. I'm glad you're here." She turned to the mirror, pretending to adjust her pearl earrings, but Marcus wasn't easily fooled. He stepped closer, stopping a few feet from her, and said, "I need to ask you something, Liv. Are you sure about Ethan?" His words landed like a stone dropped into a still lake, making Olivia freeze. She turned her eyes momentarily defensive. "Marcus, not you too. I've heard enough from Zoe already." Marcus raised a hand, signaling for calm. "I'm not trying to upset you, but I've heard some rumors. About Ethan, shady financial dealings, unknown business partners. I don't have concrete proof, but I'm worried about you and Zoe." He paused, his gaze, steady voice low but resolute. "You're the sharpest attorney I know. You've never walked into a case without examining every detail. So why with this, are you letting your heart lead?" A flush rose in Olivia's chest, part anger, part fear. She turned away, her hands gripping the edge of the vanity. "Marcus, you barely know Ethan. He loves me. He's been there through my darkest days. He's been patient with Zoe, even though she's been distant. Do you want me to doubt him because of a few rumors?" Her voice was sharp, but underneath it was a fear she didn't want to face. Marcus sighed, stepping closer. "I want you to be careful, Liv. Zoe said something too, didn't she? I saw her eyes last night. That wasn't just a child afraid of change. She saw something." His words stabbed at Olivia's heart. She remembered Zoe's pale face and the desperation in her eyes as she tried to warn her about Ethan. "I heard him talking in his office. He said you'll sign the papers after the wedding." Olivia had dismissed it, assuming Zoe had misheard or imagined things. But now, with Marcus standing here, worry etched deeply on his face, the foundation of her trust in Ethan began to tremble. She turned, her voice trembling. "I love him, Marcus. I need him. After everything I've been through, don't I deserve to be happy?" Marcus looked at her, his expression softening, but his tone unwavering. "You deserve it more than anyone, Liv. But happiness shouldn't come with doubt. Keep your eyes open. Okay?" He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, an unspoken gesture of comfort, then turned and left, leaving Olivia alone in the quiet room. She looked into the mirror and saw her strong, confident face, but now clouded with uncertainty. Zoe's words and Marcus's warnings tangled in her mind, forming a knot she couldn't undo. Meanwhile, downstairs, Zoe sat curled up on a bench in the main hall, her doll lying in her lap. She hadn't slept all night. The sound of Ethan's cold voice haunted her. "She trusts me completely. No suspicion at all." Zoe knew her mother didn't believe her, but she couldn't give up. She looked out at the garden, where the guests were beginning to gather, and saw Ethan near the fountain, his smile radiant like sunshine. But Zoe wasn't fooled. She saw how his eyes scanned the crowd like a wolf sizing up prey. His smile froze when his eyes met hers, just for a moment, but it was enough to make her shiver. Zoe clutched her doll tighter, her heart burning with determination. If her mother wouldn't listen, she would find another way. She remembered the time she secretly used her mother's phone to call Aunt Clara, their only remaining family. Clara said, "If you think your mom is in danger, you must be brave, Zoe. Find proof." Zoe didn't know what proof looked like, but she knew she had to act before her mother walked down that aisle. She stood up, her small legs trembling, and quietly approached the staircase. Ethan's office, where she'd eavesdropped the night before, might hold the answers. But before she could move, Olivia's voice called from behind Zoe. "Where are you going?" Zoe turned to see her mother at the top of the stairs, eyes filled with concern and exhaustion. Olivia stepped forward and knelt in front of her daughter. "I'm sorry about last night," she said gently. "I didn't mean to make you feel bad, but today is essential. Can you be happy for me? Just for today?" Zoe looked into her mother's eyes, wanting to tell her everything again, to scream the truth about Ethan. But she saw the vulnerability there and couldn't bring herself to do it. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Mommy." But deep down, Zoe knew she couldn't stop. She would find a way to save her mother, even if she had to do it alone. On the wedding morning, the Carter estate basked in radiant sunlight, but the air in the garden felt heavy with anticipation. Dew still sparkled on white roses and lavender bushes, perfectly arranged along the aisle that led to the floral arch where the ceremony would take place. Guests dressed in elegant silk gowns and tailored suits began gathering beneath the ancient oaks, raising glasses of champagne and whispering about the day's grandeur. Soft violin music floated through the air like an invitation to happiness. But in Zoe's heart, the quiet 7-year-old girl standing at the garden's edge, there was no room for joy. She knew time was running out, and if she didn't act now, her mother, Olivia Carter, would walk into a trap with no way out. Zoe, wearing her pale lavender dress, adorned with white flowers, clutched the doll that had once belonged to her father, the last keepsake of him. Her wide, round eyes scanned the garden, settling on Ethan Hayes, who stood near the fountain, chatting with a group of guests. Ethan, an attractive white American man, with golden hair and a warm smile, was the picture-perfect groom. But Zoe saw what no one else did, the sharp, calculating gleam in his eyes as they swept across the crowd, like a wolf sizing up its territory. Last night she had overheard his phone call in the office. "She'll sign everything after the wedding. She trusts me too much." Those cold, cruel words still haunted her and fueled her resolve. She remembered that morning when her mother had tried to make peace after their fight the night before. With her radiant brown skin and weary eyes, Olivia said, "I'm sorry, Zoe. Today is important. Can you be happy for me?" Zoe had wanted to repeat everything she'd heard to scream the truth, but she saw the fragility in her mother's eyes and couldn't bear to break her hope. Still, she couldn't stand by. If her mother wouldn't believe her, she had to find proof the kind Aunt Clara, their only remaining family, once said adults needed to listen. Zoe tightened her grip on the doll. Her heart burned with determination. She had to get into Ethan's office where she'd overheard him the night before and find something to prove he was deceiving her mother. While the guests gathered in the garden, Zoe slipped into the estate's main hall. The marble floor was cold under her bare feet, and the long hallway leading to Ethan's office seemed darker than usual. She moved silently, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Every sound, the chirping birds outside, the distant clinking of glassware from the kitchen, made her flinch. She paused and took a deep breath when she reached the office door. The door was slightly ajar, just like the night before, and there was no sign of Ethan. Zoe pushed it open. The soft creak of the hinges made her tremble. She stepped inside. Dim morning light spilled from the window onto a large wooden desk at the center of the room. Documents were neatly stacked, a laptop closed, and a sleek fountain pen lay on top. Everything looked immaculately organized. But Zoe knew the truth was hidden somewhere here. She approached the desk, her small hands shaking as she opened the top drawer. Inside were business contracts and names of unfamiliar companies she didn't understand. She moved to the second drawer, and her heart thudded when she found a slim folder labeled OC, her mother's initials, Olivia Carter. Zoe opened it and skimmed through pages filled with tiny text and numbers. She couldn't grasp it all, but she saw her mother's name repeated repeatedly alongside terms like asset transfer and power of attorney. An unsigned document stood out on the final page with the words, "Full financial control," and Ethan Hayes printed in bold. Zoe felt as if the blood in her veins turned to ice. This was the proof. Ethan planned to take everything from her mother. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Panic surged. Zoe hurriedly stuffed the folder into her dress and hid it beneath the doll in her arms. She darted behind the door, holding her breath, as Ethan entered the room. He had his phone to his ear, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Everything's ready. She'll sign after the ceremony. Don't worry, I have control." He paused, scanning the room as if sensing something was off. Zoe held her breath, shrinking into the shadows. But Ethan ended the call and walked out, never checking behind the door. Zoe waited until his footsteps faded, then bolted from the room and ran back toward the garden, her heart pounding. In the garden, Olivia greeted guests, trying to maintain a smile. Her white silk gown hugged her figure, pearl earrings sparkling beneath the morning sun. But her heart was in turmoil. Marcus's words from earlier, "Keep your eyes open," and Zoe's desperate plea from last night echoed in her mind. She glanced at Ethan laughing with friends and told herself he was the man she loved. But a small voice inside her, buried deep, began to whisper, "What if Zoe and Marcus were right?" Zoe appeared at the garden's edge, her face pale, breathing fast. She ran to Olivia, grabbed her hand, and whispered, "Mommy, I found it. In Ethan's office. The papers. He wants to take everything from you." Olivia turned, panic flashing in her eyes. She knelt, gripping Zoe's shoulders, her voice low but tense. "Zoe, what were you doing in his office? You're not allowed to go in there." Zoe shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I had to. Mommy, I saw your name on the papers. He's tricking you." Olivia felt her chest tighten, but still she brushed it aside. "Zoe, that's enough. Today is my wedding day. You can't ruin everything." Zoe stood frozen, her eyes filled with pain. She wanted to pull out the folder to show her mother the truth, but Olivia's disappointed gaze made her hesitate. She lowered her head, clutched the doll, and turned away, her heart heavy. Olivia rose, watching her daughter walk off, her heart in disarray. She wanted to believe Zoe, but her love for Ethan and her dream of a new family held her back. She turned toward the garden, where guests were beginning to take their seats for the ceremony. But in Zoe's heart, the fire of determination still burned. If her mother wouldn't believe her, she would have to do something bigger. And she knew time was running out. The garden of the Carter estate, where Olivia Carter's wedding was taking place, shimmered under the midday sun. The arch of lavender and white roses, adorned with flowing white ribbons, stood proudly at the end of the stone path where the guests had gathered. Rows of chairs draped in white silk lined the aisle, and the sound of violins from the string quartet blended with the crowd's murmurs, creating an atmosphere of elegance and anticipation. Guests in glamorous dresses and sharp suits raised glasses of champagne, all eyes turned to the path where Olivia would soon appear. But beneath the flawless exterior, a storm was waiting to erupt. Olivia stood at the head of the aisle, dressed in a fitted white silk gown, her radiant brown skin glowing in the sunlight. Her curly hair was pinned up and adorned with a delicate pearl tiara that made her look like a queen, but her hands clutching a bouquet of white roses trembled slightly. She took a deep breath, trying to banish the unease that had haunted her all morning. Zoe's warning. "He's trying to trick you," and Marcus's advice. "Keep your eyes open," echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside, reminding herself that today was her day to be happy. She looked toward Ethan Hayes standing beneath the floral arch, beaming, a white American man with golden hair and sparkling blue eyes. He was the man she loved, and she believed he would build a future for her and Zoe. Zoe sat in the front row, wearing her pale lavender dress, clutching the small doll tightly to her chest. Her wide, round eyes never left Ethan. Her heart filled with fear and resolve. The folder she had found in his office, contracts with her mother's name phrases like asset transfer, was still hidden beneath her dress, but her mother didn't believe her. Zoe had tried to warn her, but Olivia looked at her with disappointment each time. Zoe felt like she was standing atop a dam about to break, and time was slipping away. When the officiant began his speech, his warm voice rang out. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Olivia Carter and Ethan Hayes." Zoe knew she could wait no longer. "Stop, Zoe." Zoe's small but piercing voice cut through the ceremony like a knife. The entire garden froze. The violin music ceased, and every gaze turned toward the 7-year-old girl standing in the middle of the aisle, her face pale, but her eyes burning. Olivia, strolling down the aisle, stopped in her tracks. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. Beneath the arch, Ethan froze for a second, a flicker of panic in his eyes, before returning to his warm smile. The crowd murmured whispers, rippling through the guests like waves. "Mommy can't marry him," Zoe cried out, her voice trembling but firm. She pointed at Ethan, her tiny hands clenched. "He's tricking you. I found the papers in his office. He wants to take all your money." The atmosphere solidified like stone. Guests, close friends, and colleagues exchanged stunned and curious glances. A few people raised their phones to record. Olivia felt her face flush, part shame, part confusion. She rushed to Zoe, the sound of her wedding dress brushing the stone path, and knelt before her daughter. "Zoe, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice low, but shaking with anger. "You can't ruin this day." But Zoe didn't back down. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her gaze was unshaken. "Mommy, I had to. I saw your name on the papers. He said you'd sign them after the wedding and that you trust him too much." "Mommy, he doesn't love you." Ethan stepped forward, composed, but his eyes briefly flashed coldly toward Zoe. He bent down and placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder, speaking in a warm voice, loud enough for the guests to hear. "Leave. Zoe's just scared. She misses her father and doesn't want things to change. We understand, don't we?" He turned to Zoe, offering a gentle but artificial smile. "Zoe, don't you want your mom to be happy? She loves me." But Zoe shook her head fiercely, her voice cracking as she cried out, "No, you're lying. I heard you on the phone. You want her to sign the papers so you can take everything." She pulled the folder from beneath her dress, raising the trembling pages in her small hands. The murmurs in the crowd swelled whispers, turning to questions, curiosity shifting into suspicion. An older woman covered her mouth. A man shook his head, his eyes darting between Zoe and Ethan. Olivia looked at the folder, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, that Zoe had imagined everything. But her daughter's eyes, filled with despair and sincerity, made her hesitate. She stood up and turned to Ethan, her voice shaking. "Ethan, what is this? What is she talking about, these papers?" Ethan gave a soft chuckle, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Liv, are you serious? Zoe's just a kid. She could be confused. You know I love you." But Olivia didn't respond. She stared into Ethan's eyes, searching for the truth in the depths of his icy blue gaze. And in a single instant, she saw it, a flicker of panic. There was a flash of deceit before he masked it with his familiar smile. Her heart clenched. But still, she couldn't let herself believe it. Not yet. She turned back to Zoe, her voice low but steady. "Zoe, please give me the papers." Zoe's hands shook as she handed over the folder, her eyes full of hope. Olivia flipped through the documents, seeing her name and phrases like power of attorney and asset transfer. She didn't understand it all, but a chilling sensation spread. The crowd had fallen silent. Every eye was fixed on the trio standing in the garden center. Bird song and the gentle rustle of wind through the oaks seemed swallowed by the tension. Olivia felt her world tilt. She wanted to scream, to run, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice still soft, but now with a note of urgency. "Liv, let's talk in private. There's no need to cause a scene in front of everyone." But Zoe, her voice small, yet razor sharp, cried out, "No, Mommy, don't listen to him." At that moment, Olivia felt something crack inside her, just a hairline fracture minor, but impossible to ignore. The garden of the Carter estate, where the wedding had just been interrupted, now sat under a breathless silence. The lavender and white roses, arch once a symbol of love, now stood as a silent witness to chaos. The guests, seated on rows of white silk-covered chairs, exchanged stunned looks, while whispers rippled like waves. Some still held up their phones, capturing the moment when Zoe, a 7-year-old girl in a pale lavender dress, stood in the aisle holding up a folder and shouting that Ethan Hayes was deceiving her mother. Olivia Carter, dressed in her white silk gown, stood before her daughter, hands trembling as she clutched the documents, her heart pounding so violently it felt like it might burst. Olivia skimmed the folder with her radiant brown skin glowing in the midday sun. Words like asset transfer and power of attorney danced before her eyes, but she still hesitated to believe. She looked up at Ethan standing under the floral arch, his smile still on his face, but the sparkle in his blue eyes now appeared strained. "Ethan," she said, her voice shaky but sharp, "explain this. What are these papers?" The crowd held its breath. Every eye turned to the white American man with golden hair, who had seemed the perfect groom only moments ago. Ethan stepped forward, appearing composed, but his hands were clenched. He gave a soft smile, his warm voice rising just enough to reassure the guests. "Liv, sweetheart, Zoe's just scared. She's confused. Those documents must be business contracts. You know I'd never hurt you." He gently placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder, a tender gesture, but one that held subtle pressure. "Let's talk about this privately. Don't let this ruin our special day." But Olivia didn't respond. She stared into his eyes, the ones she once believed were full of love, searching for truth. And then she saw a flicker of panic, a flash of deception so brief it might have been missed, but sharp enough to freeze her blood. Standing beside her mother, Zoe sensed the shift in Olivia's gaze. She gripped her mother's hand, her voice small but unwavering. "Mommy, he's lying. I saw your name on the papers. He wants you to sign so he can take everything." Tears streamed down Zoe's face, but she didn't step back. The crowd murmured again, this time louder. "What papers? Is the girl telling the truth?" An older woman shook her head, glancing at Ethan with growing suspicion. A younger man leaned to his friend and whispered, "I heard rumors about shady deals he was involved in." Olivia's head throbbed. She wanted to believe Ethan that it was all a misunderstanding, but Zoe's eyes filled with sincerity and desperation, and the documents in her hands screamed a truth she could no longer ignore. She turned to Ethan, her voice low but razor sharp. "Ethan, tell me the truth. Were you planning for me to sign these documents after the wedding?" Ethan smiled again, but it looked more forced this time. "Liv, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Zoe's just a child. She probably misunderstood. You know I love you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You know that, right?" But before Olivia could answer, a deep voice rang out from the crowd. "Olivia, listen to Zoe." Marcus Tate, Olivia's best friend and an investigative journalist, stepped forward from the front row. Dressed in a pale gray suit, his sharp eyes fixed on Ethan. "I warned you this morning. I've heard rumors about Ethan's shady financial dealings and disappearing partners. Zoe might be right." The murmurs intensified now, turning into audible doubts. Marcus turned to Olivia, his voice firm but full of concern. "You're a lawyer. You know how to read contracts. Look at them carefully." Olivia felt her world spin. She looked down at the folder again, this time more slowly. Her name appeared on every page, accompanied by clauses on asset transfers, company shares, and an unsigned power of attorney agreement. She didn't need to read it all to understand if she signed, Ethan would have control of everything she had built, her career, assets, her daughter's future. She looked up, her eyes now burning as they met Ethan's. "You planned this from the start, didn't you?" she asked, her voice low but sharp as a blade. Ethan clenched his jaw. The smile on his face faded. "Liv, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's a misunderstanding." But his voice no longer carried the smooth confidence it once had. It cracked, slightly tinged with tension, with panic he could no longer hide. The crowd fell silent again. All eyes locked on him, waiting. Zoe gripped her mother's hand tighter, her voice breaking. "Mommy, I'm telling the truth. He doesn't love you. He only wants the money." That final, painful declaration pierced Olivia's trust like a final blow. She stepped back, pulling Zoe into her arms and shielding her from Ethan. Once filled with love, her eyes were now those of a sharp-witted attorney, a mother ready to protect her child. "Ethan," she said, her voice cold as ice, "if this is a misunderstanding, then you won't mind if I have these reviewed. Right now." Ethan blinked. His hands trembled slightly. He opened his mouth to speak, but said nothing. And in that silence, Olivia felt it, a fracture, not just in her trust, but in the entire world she had built around Ethan. The crowd erupted into whispers, phones raised even higher, recording every moment. Marcus stepped closer, resting a hand gently on Olivia's shoulder. His voice was low, but resolute. "Liv, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here." Zoe clung to her mother, tears soaking into the silk of Olivia's wedding gown. And in that moment, beneath the midday sun, in a garden once meant for love, Olivia felt the truth rise to the surface, sharp, painful, and undeniable. The garden of the Carter estate, where Olivia Carter's wedding had just been disrupted, was taut with silence, tight as a drawn string. The arch of lavender and white roses, once a symbol of love, now stood solemn in the heavy air. Guests sat motionless on white silk-covered chairs, their eyes shifting between Olivia, Zoe, and Ethan Hayes, still in her white silk wedding gown. Olivia clutched the folder Zoe had handed her, pages filled with phrases like asset transfer and power of attorney cutting through her trust like knives. Her radiant brown skin shimmered under the noonday sun, but her sharp brown eyes now burned with doubt. Zoe, the 7-year-old girl in a pale lavender dress, stood beside her mother, tears rolling down her cheeks, yet her gaze was unwavering. Ethan, beneath the floral arch, tried to maintain his smile, but the panic flickering behind his blue eyes, behind the perfect image of a white American groom, could no longer be hidden. Olivia spoke in a low, cold voice, staring straight into Ethan's eyes. "If I have everything reviewed, do you?" Each word sliced through the air. The crowd buzzed with whispers. "What's this about documents? Did he try to scam her?" Several guests raised their phones higher, recording every moment. Ethan clenched his jaw. His smile now looked twisted. "Liv, you're blowing this out of proportion," he said, his voice still smooth but trembling beneath the surface. "We can handle this privately. Don't let Zoe ruin everything." But before Olivia could respond, Zoe cried out, her voice breaking. "Mommy, don't listen to him. I'm telling the truth. He wants to take everything from you." The atmosphere turned to stone. Olivia felt her heart seize. She looked at Zoe. saw the sincerity in her daughter's eyes, then turned to Ethan, the man she had once believed was the love of her life. His gaze, once warm, now revealed itself as hollow and false. She opened her mouth to demand the truth, but before she could speak, a deep, commanding voice rang out from the edge of the garden. "Ethan Hayes, please come with us to ask questions." Two police officers in dark blue uniforms stepped forward from the crowd, hands near their belts, eyes sharp and unwavering. The crowd erupted in stunned murmurs and gasps. "Police, what's happening?" Olivia froze the bouquet in her hands, trembling. She turned to Zoe, bewildered. "Zoe, what is this?" Zoe, tears still falling, looked up at her mother and said softly but firmly, "I called the police. Mommy, last night after I heard him on the phone. I knew you wouldn't believe me, but I had to protect you." Those words, full of love and courage, pierced Olivia's heart like a final blow. She dropped to her knees, embracing Zoe tightly as tears streamed down her face. You called the police," she whispered, her voice choked. Ethan stood beneath the arch, pale as a sheet. The perfect Groom's smile had vanished, replaced by undisguised fury. "That little girl is lying," he shouted, pointing at Zoe. "She made it all up. I didn't do anything wrong." But his voice cracked. His eyes darted toward the officers searching for an escape route. One officer, tall and calm, stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, we've received reports of financial misconduct linked to you. You need to come with us now." He motioned with his hand for Ethan to step forward. But Ethan stepped back, eyes wild with panic. The crowd was no longer silent. The whispers had become sharp gasps, murmurs of outrage and disbelief. An older woman exclaimed, "I knew it. He was too perfect to be real." A young man whispered, "She's only 7. And she called the police. Phones were now raised high, capturing every second. Marcus Tate, Olivia's longtime friend and investigative journalist, stepped out from the front row. His eyes locked onto Ethan like a blade. "Liv," he said firmly, his voice low but resolute. "Zoe did the right thing. Let the police take it from here." Like a protective wall, he stood beside Olivia, and Zoe never taking his eyes off Ethan. Olivia, still clutching Zoe, felt her world collapse. She looked at Ethan, the man she had once loved and trusted, and now saw only a stranger. "Ethan," she said coldly, "you lied to me. You were going to take everything, weren't you?" Ethan opened his mouth to deny it, but the officer interrupted. "That's enough, Mr. Hayes. Come with us, or we'll be forced to restrain you." Ethan clenched his jaw, his eyes sweeping from Olivia to Zoe, and then for a split second, the fury inside him broke loose. "You'll regret this, Olivia," he growled, low and venomous. "And so will that girl." But Olivia didn't flinch. She stood, pulling Zoe into her arms, her eyes sharp as steel. "No, Ethan," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're the one who'll regret it." The tall officer stepped forward and placed a firm hand on Ethan's shoulder. In the stunned silence of the crowd, he was led away, his glare still fixed on Olivia and Zoe, burning with hatred. The sharp click of handcuffs rang through the garden as Ethan disappeared behind the oaks, leaving behind a deathly stillness. Olivia dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around Zoe, her tears soaked into her daughter's hair. "You saved me," she whispered through sobs. Zoe, trembling in her mother's embrace, whispered back, "I just wanted you to be safe." The guests began to drift away, murmuring, torn between admiration and disbelief. Marcus stood beside them, his eyes now softer, though still alert. "Liv," he said, "we need to examine those papers. The police will need them." Olivia nodded her gaze, never leaving Zoe. Her heart overflowed with love and remorse. She hadn't believed her daughter. But Zoe, with the bravery of a child, had done what she could not. Once a place of love, the garden had become a battleground for truth. The sun still blazed in the sky, but the air had changed. It was colder, sharper. And in her mother's arms, Zoe knew she had done the right thing, even if her little heart was still trembling with fear. The garden of the Carter estate, where the wedding had just shattered, now lay under a suffocating silence. The once vibrant lavender and white roses glowing hours earlier in the midday sun now looked wilted beneath the weight of tension. Guests, still stunned by the police's arrival, and Ethan Hayes being taken away, began to disperse soft murmurs echoing like ripples across the air. Olivia Carter, her once elegant white silk wedding gown now crumpled, stood in the middle of the stone aisle, clutching Zoe, her 7-year-old daughter, who had just saved her from a well-planned deception. Olivia's radiant brown skin shimmered under the sun, but her sharp brown eyes were filled with pain and regret. In her pale lavender dress, Zoe buried her face in her mother's chest, still clutching her doll, her talisman through the storm they'd just endured. Olivia knelt down and gently stroked Zoe's hair, her voice breaking. "You saved me, Zoe. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." Zoe looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, but her eyes remained resolute. "I just wanted you to be safe," she whispered, filled with love. Olivia held her tightly, her heart torn open by love and remorse. She had let her feelings for Ethan, the golden-haired, blue-eyed American man with the perfect smile, cloud a mother's instincts. But Zoe, with the courage of a child, had shattered his mask. Marcus Tate, Olivia's best friend and an investigative journalist, stood just a few steps away. His expression softened as he watched the mother and daughter embrace. He stepped forward, his voice low but steady. "Liv, we need to search Ethan's office. The documents Zoe found are just the beginning. There's likely more." Olivia nodded, her expression shifting from sorrow to resolve. She stood, took Zoe's hand and said, "Let's go. I want to know everything." Marcus led the way as the three entered the mansion's main hall, leaving behind the overturned white chairs and shattered champagne glasses scattered across the lawn. The hallway leading to Ethan's office was cold and eerily quiet, so unlike the bustle of the wedding morning. The marble floor reflected the pale light from the windows, and Olivia's footsteps echoed like a declaration of war. Zoe clung tightly to her mother's hand, her eyes flickering between fear and determination. When they reached the office door, Olivia pushed it open. The creaking hinges groaned like a warning. The room looked just as Zoe had remembered: a large wooden desk, neatly stacked files, and a closed laptop. But now it all felt staged, a set designed to conceal lies. Olivia stepped to the desk, hands trembling as she opened the drawer where Zoe had found the documents. Inside, she found more contracts, all bearing her name, Olivia Carter, with terms for asset transfers, shares of her law firm, and financial control clauses. But what truly froze her blood was a life insurance policy listing her as the primary holder, amended to make Ethan the beneficiary in the event of her death. She staggered back, her breath, shallow hands gripping the documents. "He's been planning this for a long time," she whispered in horror. Marcus, standing beside her, scanned the papers. His face darkened. "Liv, I've heard whispers about Ethan before," he said, voice heavy. "He targets wealthy, independent women, often single mothers. He seduces them, earns their trust, and then drains them through forged contracts. You were his most significant prize." He pointed at another document with a forged signature, hers. "He had it all ready. I'm just waiting for the wedding to finish." Olivia's mind buzzed. She turned to Zoe, her eyes full of remorse. "If it weren't for you..." She choked on the words, pulling her daughter close. Zoe, still trembling, looked up at her mother and said softly but firmly, "I knew you'd believe me. You just needed time." That simple sentence, filled with love and forgiveness, brought Olivia to tears. She dropped to her knees and held Zoe as her lifeline. Her heart, battered and raw, was healing, stitched together by the strength of her daughter's courage. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Olivia's shoulder. "You don't need to blame yourself," he said gently. "He's a professional manipulator." But Zoe destroyed his plan. He looked at Zoe and smiled. "You're a hero, Zoe." Olivia stood, her eyes now sharp, like a lawyer ready to enter a courtroom. "I want him to pay," she said coldly. "Not just for what he did to me, but to Zoe and to every other woman he's hurt." Marcus nodded, his expression resolute. "The police will need these documents. I'll contact a friend in the department, make sure they have everything they need." He carefully collected the papers into a folder, while Olivia and Zoe stood side by side, two survivors, battle-worn but unbroken. At that moment, Olivia looked at Zoe, and no longer saw just a child, but a brave soul who had pulled her from the shadows. "I will never stop believing you again," she whispered, brushing Zoe's hair back. Zoe smiled for the first time that day and said, "I love you, Mommy." That simple truth, spoken with such purity, was like sunlight breaking through the darkest storm, warming Olivia's heart with hope. They exited the office and entered the main hall, where sunlight from the grand window spilled across the marble floor in golden patches. The mansion, once a stage for deception, now felt lighter, as though the truth had swept away its shadows. But Olivia knew the journey wasn't over. She and Zoe would still face curious eyes, whispered gossip, and the scars Ethan had left behind. But with Zoe by her side, she knew they would survive it all. The Carter estate, once glowing under the sunlight of a wedding day, now sank into a weary stillness as dusk fell. The garden, where Olivia Carter's wedding had collapsed, was littered with overturned white silk chairs, shattered champagne flutes in the grass, and trampled lavender bushes. The guests had long departed, carrying with them whispers about the moment 7-year-old Zoe interrupted the ceremony to expose Ethan Hayes, and the dramatic arrival of the police who escorted him away. Olivia, still in her crumpled wedding dress, sat on the steps of the grand hall, her eyes lost in the fading light. Her radiant brown skin caught the last golden glow of sunset, but her deep brown eyes bore the weight of pain and resolve. In her pale lavender dress, Zoe sat beside her mother, her doll in her lap. Her eyes flickered between courage and the lingering fear of what had just unfolded. Olivia gently held Zoe's hand, feeling the warmth of those small fingers. After uncovering the forged documents in Ethan's office, the fake contracts, the life insurance policy, the plans to take everything, Olivia realized how close she'd come to losing it all. But Zoe had saved her with courage far beyond her years. "I'm sorry, Zoe," Olivia whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "I didn't listen to you, but you were stronger than I ever was." Zoe looked up, her eyes shimmering. "She said I didn't want anyone to hurt you, soft, but sure." Olivia pulled her close, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. At that moment, despite her heartbreak, she felt her soul slowly begin to heal. But the outside world was far from quiet. Footage from the wedding, captured by guests on their phones, had spread across social media like wildfire. Titles like "7-year-old girl stops her mother's wedding to expose a con man" flooded every corner of the internet. Articles appeared rapidly, from clickbait tabloids to respected news outlets, detailing the story of Olivia Carter, the accomplished attorney, and Zoe, the brave little girl. Some praised Zoe as a child hero, but the cruel undercurrents of public judgment soon followed. How could a lawyer fall for a scam like that? She was blinded by love. Olivia, who had long grown used to scrutiny in courtrooms, now felt a different kind of pressure, the weight of public opinion. A new type of trial had begun. Marcus Tate, her best friend and investigative journalist, entered the hall with 2 drinks, a hot coffee for Olivia and a warm cup of cocoa for Zoe. "Liv," he said, sitting beside her. "I just spoke to a friend at the police department. They're building a case against Ethan. With the documents we found, he won't get off easy." Olivia nodded, her eyes sharpening again. "I want him to pay Marcus. Not just for what he did to me and Zoe, but for every woman he's hurt." Marcus smiled, his expression full of respect. "You'll make it happen. And Zoe?" He turned to the girl, handing her the cocoa. "You're today's true hero." Zoe took the cup and offered a faint smile, though her eyes still held shadows of fear. "I just wanted Mommy to be safe," she whispered. Olivia studied her daughter, sensing courage and a deep emotional scar forming beneath it. She brushed Zoe's hair gently and asked, "How do you feel, sweetheart? Are you scared?" Zoe bit her lip and looked down at her doll. "I'm scared he'll come back," she murmured. "And I'm scared people will think you did something wrong." Her words struck Olivia like a blow to the heart. She pulled Zoe into her arms, her voice steady. "I won't let him come back. And as for what people say, I'll face them. We'll face it together. Okay?" Zoe nodded, a flicker of hope glimmering in her eyes. That night, Olivia made a decision. With Marcus's help, she wrote a heartfelt post and shared it on social media, her version of the truth. She detailed Ethan's deception and Zoe's bravery. She wrote that, "I let love cloud my judgment, but my daughter Zoe reminded me that truth is always worth fighting for. I share this story to warn others and to thank my daughter, my hero." The post went viral, garnering thousands of shares and supportive comments. Several of Olivia's colleagues called to express admiration, but the trolls came to accusations of naivety, of poor judgment. Reading those words stung, but then Olivia looked at Zoe peacefully, asleep beside her, and knew she had to stay strong for both of them. Even at just 7 years old, Zoe could sense the pressure. She had overheard Olivia and Marcus discussing the media coverage and worried she had embarrassed her mother. But the next morning, when Olivia took her to a small cafe for breakfast, something unexpected happened. A woman, older and kind-eyed, approached their table. "You must be Zoe," she said warmly. "You're courageous, you saved your mother, and you make me proud of the younger generation." Zoe blinked, her cheeks turning pink. "Thank you," she said quietly. Olivia smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling a spark of hope. The world could be harsh, but their love was stronger. Later that day, Marcus returned to the estate with more news. "Ethan scammed at least 3 other women," he said, voice grim. "It has the same pattern, charm, forged contracts, then disappear. But thanks to Zoe, he was stopped before he could strike again." Olivia nodded, eyes blazing with purpose. "I'll testify, Marcus. He won't get away with this." Zoe, seated beside her, looked up. Her voice was quiet but resolute. "I don't want anyone else to go through what you did." The words silenced them both. Zoe hadn't just saved her mother, she was already thinking of others. Her compassion and emotional maturity had outgrown her years. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Carter estate no longer felt like a place of deception. It had become a space for healing, a sanctuary, where a mother and daughter, though scarred, had found strength in each other. Olivia held Zoe's hand, her heart lighter than it had been in days. The world could judge, the world could whisper, but with Zoe by her side, she could face anything. The Carter estate was bathed in soft, clear sunlight the morning after the broken wedding. Pale golden rays streamed through the grand windows, casting warm light on the marble floor, pushing away the shadows that once haunted the house. The garden where Olivia Carter's wedding had been interrupted now lay in quiet peace. Though traces of chaos remained overturned white silk chairs, crushed lavender bushes, the atmosphere had changed. It felt lighter, as if the truth had cleansed the lies. Olivia, now in a simple sweater instead of her wedding gown, sat on the living room floor with her back against the sofa. Her warm brown skin glowed under the sunlight, and though her eyes still held fatigue, there was a flicker of hope within them. Beside her sat 7-year-old Zoe, now dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, her lavender dress replaced. The small doll rested in her lap, still her silent companion through the storm. Olivia held Zoe's hand, drawing comfort from the tiny fingers curled in hers. After everything they had faced, the betrayal by Ethan Hayes, Zoe's fearless stand, and the crushing weight of public opinion, mother and daughter had found something steady in each other. Olivia gently stroked Zoe's hair and asked softly, "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Zoe looked up, her big eyes shimmering with courage, but still tinged with worry. She whispered, "I'm still a little scared, but I'm happy you're safe." Olivia smiled, tears forming. "So am I. Zoe, you saved me, and I will never forget that." They sat silently, listening to birdsong through the window and the rustle of wind in the oak trees. Olivia's thoughts drifted to Ethan, the golden-haired American man, with a charming smile, who had almost stolen everything she had built. The forged documents in his office, the altered life insurance, the plan to control her assets, all evidence of something much darker. But above all, she thought of Zoe, her daughter, who had seen what Olivia had failed to. Olivia pulled her close and said, voice shaking, "I promise you, from now on, I'll always listen. Whatever you say, I'll believe you." Zoe smiled, her cheeks flushed pink. "I know, Mommy," she said quietly with certainty. The door to the living room opened, and Marcus Tate stepped inside, carrying a cup of coffee for Olivia and a hot chocolate for Zoe. "Good morning," he said, settling down across from them. Dressed in a simple shirt, Marcus looked more relaxed, but the sharpness of an investigative journalist still lingered in his eyes. "I just heard from the police. Ethan has officially been charged with financial fraud and document forgery. With the evidence we provided, he won't be getting out anytime soon." Olivia nodded, her gaze fierce again. "Good. I'll testify. He needs to pay." Marcus smiled, admiration in his eyes. "You'll do it, Liv. And Zoe." He turned to the little girl, handing her the cocoa. "You changed everything." Zoe's eyes lit up as she looked at Marcus. "Can I help more people too, Uncle Marcus?" she asked, voice soft but full of hope. Marcus nodded gently. "You already have, Zoe. Your story and your mom's has inspired so many. Some of the women Ethan tricked have contacted the police after reading your mom's post." Zoe smiled, truly smiled for the first time in days. Olivia's heart lifted. Her daughter hadn't just saved her. She had opened a path for justice for others. Olivia remembered the social media post she had written with Marcus's help, publicly sharing the truth about Ethan and Zoe's bravery. The post had gone viral, drawing thousands of shares and supportive comments from friends, colleagues, and strangers. But there were harsh voices too. People calling her naive, gullible. Their words stung, but she knew she had to stay strong each time she looked at Zoe. Zoe said gently, "What do you think we should do next?" Zoe bit her lip, thinking, then said, "I want us to go somewhere. Just you and me. Somewhere nobody judges you." Olivia smiled and stroked her cheek. "That sounds perfect. How about the beach, like when you were little? We'll build sandcastles, eat ice cream, and forget the rest of the world." Zoe nodded, eyes lighting up. "And, can you tell me stories about Dad again?" Olivia nodded, her eyes misty. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll tell you everything about your daddy, James, the man who loved us more than anything. She held Zoe close, and for the first time in a long while, the memories of James, her late husband, no longer felt like pain. They were part of her strength. Marcus stood gently patting Olivia's shoulder. "I'll handle the rest with the police," he said firmly. "You and Zoe focus on each other. You deserve that." Olivia looked up, eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Marcus. You've always been there for me." Marcus smiled and winked at Zoe. "And you, little lady, keep being a hero. Okay?" Zoe giggled, and warmth filled the room like morning light for that moment. Olivia and Zoe stayed seated on the floor, sunlight pouring through the windows and wrapping them in a gentle golden glow. Once, a place of deception, the estate was now their place of rebuilding. Olivia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy: court hearings, public scrutiny, and healing wounds. But with Zoe beside her, she felt she could face anything. "We're going to be okay, right, Mommy?" Zoe asked, her voice small, but full of hope. Olivia smiled, kissed her on the forehead, and replied firmly, "We already are, my love." Outside, the morning sun continued to rise, carrying with it the promise of a new dawn. Mother and daughter, hand in hand, stood ready to walk into a future not without scars, but filled with love and a courage that would never fade.